Hi, it's V from Crafting Daily Dose. Today we're going to be making an alternative pop-up card for the February 2021 paper pumpkin called Bouquet of Hope. And as you can see, there are lots of elements in this month's kit. The Stampin' Spot that comes with the kit is this dark olive color called Mossy Meadow. I'll show you the stamp set. There's a beautiful bouquet of flowers and then sentiments that are good for sympathy cards or encouragement cards. And then here's a picture of the recommended project using the kit elements. There are 3 different card designs and 3 of each one, so 9 cards total. And then on the back are some possible alternative ideas. Stampin' Up! Always lists the coordinating colors. So this month they are Basic Black, Bumblebee, Just Jade, Merry Merlot, Mossy Meadow, and Rococo Rose. We're going to be using these elements though to make a different alternative, and we'll get started. Let's look at the card bases. I'm going to recommend that you use one of these two just because the 2 sides are going to be the same. Your card base is already going to come with a score line right down the middle at 4 1/4 inches, and we're going to go ahead and add some additional score lines. The first one is going to be at 1/4 inch from the edge. So probably the easiest way to do that is to use the measurements here on the right hand side. So I'm going to put it at 1/4 inch. And then I want to be careful that I'm using my scoring blade and not my cutting blade. So if you're using the Stampin' Up! Trimmer, that's going to be the lighter one. Then I'm going to turn this around. So right now we have 1/4 inch here, and then the 4 1/4 that we started out with. Now we want a score line at 2 1/4 inches. Then we're going to skip over to 6 1/4 inches. And again, if you're using the same trimmer, it's going to be in this brown part here. That's going to be our indication line for the 6 1/4. Then for our last step, we are going to move it to 8 1/4 inches. And this time, instead of trimming, we're going to be cutting. Now what I want to do is to measure out 3 inches from the top edge along this edge that we just cut, as well as along this side, just inside of that 1/4 inch score line. I'm going to use a pen so that you can see what I'm doing, but on your own paper you would probably choose to use a pencil or make just a very light mark. So I'm going to turn my paper this way. I'm going to put it at the 3 inch mark. And then I'm going to mark here. So I'm using the center of the cutting track as my guide. And then on this side, I'm going to mark it at 3 inches. And again, I'm on this side, on the left, I'm not going to mark right at the edge, but I'm going to mark where that score line is. This is going to be my guide to create diagonal score lines that go from the top of the center crease to our marks that we made on either side. I'm going to mark the top of that center score line, the one that already came with the card base, just to see it better. So what I want to do is to make a score from here down to the 3 inch mark that I made. So I'm going to line both of those up along the center of the trimmer track, and then being careful to push my blade out of the way, I'm then going to score. Now I'm going to do the same thing using this mark as a guide, and then going to the top of that other crease line. And I'm going to just eyeball it here. I've gone in and traced all of the score lines for you so that you can more clearly see what's going on. This is a 1/4 inch, 2 1/4, the original 4 1/4, 6 1/4, and then remember we cut off this last 1/4 inch, and so there's nothing on this side. Then we connected the top of this score line to the 3-inch mark here on the side, and then also to the other side. So now we formed this peak of a triangle. Now we want to create a score line at 1.5 inches from the top, but we're only going to score from the edge to this first intersection here. And then again, the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to take the triangle peak, turn it to the left, put it at 1.5 inches, and score it part of the way, passing this first line, and then when I get to the second one, I will stop, and then I'm moving over to this last line here, and then scoring from there to the top. Let me go ahead and trace that in for you. And then finally, we're going to measure out a 1-inch mark and a 3/4 inch mark along these edges. I'm going to measure out 1 inch along this side, so that's one of these segments here, and then 3/4 inches in this direction. So this is 1, 2, 3 of these blocks. I'm going to do the same thing on the other edge, except remember I'm marking along this crease. So it's going to be 1 inch here, and then 1, 2, 3 of these 1/4 inch blocks. And my last scoring step is going to be to put these in like we did before, and we're going to create score lines connecting these dots. And once again, I will trace those in. Now that we have our score line set, we're going to trim off some of these sections. Now, you could do this on the trimmer, but I think it's just a lot easier to do it with snips now that we know where all of our lines are. So I'm going to start with cutting off this section here. So I'm cutting this straight line. And then when it joins with the diagonal, I'm now going to follow the diagonal line up to the top of that triangle peak. And then the same thing on the other side. Following the straight line. Then when it joins up with the diagonal, I'm going to join the diagonal line instead to go up to that top triangle peak. The only other section that we have to cut off is along here. This is going to form a gluing tab to connect the ends together. So I'm going to cut down this straight line, then I'm going to follow this little diagonal here. And then I'm going to come back around, going to follow this straight line and then the diagonal. So after we've made our trims, this is what the piece looks like. We're going to go ahead and fold these score lines. These vertical folds here are going to be mountain folds because I want the patterned part of the card base to be able to show on the outside. If you wanted to have the white showing on the outside instead, then you would do the opposite. And then this last little one, that is the glue tab, that's also going to be a mountain fold. And then the diagonal folds are going to be valley folds. After we've made our folds, our piece looks like this. We're going to flip it around and you can start to see it coming together. We also need to cut a little strip of scrap cardstock. This one is 3/4 inches high, although the exact height doesn't matter too much. It is 3 inches wide and it's scored at 1/2 inch from each side. And I'm going to fold those as mountain folds like this. Then I'm going to either use my fingers or a bone folder to sort of stretch out and curl the fibers in between the two score lines. This just helps to loosen up the fibers and to make that part more flexible. I'm going to bring in the bouquet die cut so I can show you where it's going to go. We want it high enough so that we can see as much of the flowers as possible, but not so high that it's going to be higher than this peak, because then otherwise it won't fit in the envelope. So in order to hold this here, we're going to need our support piece that we had done earlier to be right about here, so that it can hold up the bouquet and be hidden under the widest part of the bouquet. You can use liquid adhesive here, or if you have the patience for it, you can use the mini glue dots from the kit. I'm going to use tear and tape, and I'm going to use spare scissors to trim off the edges. I like to use the tear and tape because it lets me be precise and it is a strong hold. I have some excess on the edges here, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. We don't want that to accidentally stick to things that we don't intend for it to. So I'm going to go ahead and place it down and kind of eyeball the middle of this strip with this center crease here. Because there's a lot of flexibility in the way that this support piece curves, it doesn't have to be precisely in the middle like a lot of pop-ups might need to be. And then I'm going to put some tear and tape along this glue tab as well. Once I put the tear and tape on that, I'm going to press down this section and then press the other section onto it so that I know that this thing can fold down completely flat. Now when we take our piece and open it up, you can see how this support piece flexes. I'm going to take a couple of strips of tear and tape and put it along the middle of this seam on both sides, and using short strips, maybe about 1/2 inch. Then I'll peel off the backing. I'm going to bring in the twine from the kit and wrap it around several times. The tear and tape is going to be what helps it to stay in place. Next, we're going to stamp a sentiment onto one of the labels from the kit using the Mossy Meadow ink. Remember these pieces that we had cut off? I'm going to go ahead and trim this down so I can use it for something else here. I'm going to trim off the triangle piece and trim off this little extra piece on the end here. And then the height on this right now is about 1.5 inches. I'm going to trim that down to, let's do 3/4 of an inch. So really using up the scraps here. Now this is going to be about 2 inches in width. We're going to trim it down to 1 inch. It does not have to be at all precise. And then each of these are going to be scored in the middle, so at approximately 1/2 inch. Okay, so now we have these little scored rectangles, and we're going to hang on to these. The rectangles are going to be mounted onto the card, and they are going to support the label. So each of those score lines is going to be a valley fold, and it's going to be placed onto our card, something like that. And before you do that, you want to make sure that you're happy with your twine placement and that it's not too loose. You can use tear and tape again, or I'm just going to use this glue because I think that's a little bit easier, but you can use whatever kind of adhesive that you have on hand as long as it's pretty strong. And if you're able to, it's nice if you can match up the stripes so it's a little bit less obvious looking, but that's not imperative. I'm going to do my other side. This is mostly going to be hidden anyway. Just looks a little bit more finished just in case somebody sneaks a peek. And then I have a little bit of twine hanging out there, so I'm just going to snip that off. I'm going to fold these supports down, put a little bit of glue on them. And then the label is going to go right over that. I'm just going to eyeball, trying to get it centered both horizontally and vertically. Press down for it to set. Okay, and there we are. So it's going to lay flat, and then when the person opens it up, this label is going to be popped out. Now this next part is totally optional. I'm going to create another layer to make it look like our bouquet is wrapped in something else inside the card. And I'm going to use the vellum for this. Now I know a lot of people prefer to stretch out their supplies to get as many projects as they can out of a kit. So if you don't want to use the vellum, you can also use the tissue paper that your supplies came wrapped in, or you can use the pretty pattern envelope if you cut out this paper, or any other paper that you have on hand. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn it so that the long side is at the top, and I'm going to cut at 1 1/4 inches. And then I'm going to cut. I want to cut it in half so that each side is 2 inches. I'm going to take this remaining piece and also cut it at 2 inches. So we're basically cutting all of these in half. I'm done with the cutting blade now, and I'm going to do just a little bit of scoring on these two smaller pieces. I'm going to score them at 1/4 inch from the plain edge. So I'm going to measure on the right hand side here, put it at 1/4 inch. Next, I'm going to take my vellum paper and turn it over so that I'm seeing the more silvery side of the print, not the gold side. And I'm going to put tear and tape along this upper edge above the score line. Once you have the tear and tape on, flip it back over so that you can see the gold side, and you're going to make these score lines as mountain folds away from you. And then this is going to be adhered to the inner edge of the card right here so that your pieces are going to look like this. I think it's nice to put this outer border on this side. Then the other outer border goes on the left-hand side. So it's going to look like this. So I'm going to take off the backing and stick it into place. Our remaining two pieces of vellum are going to fan out behind the bouquet like this. And I'm going to use tear and tape to put all of this together because it works well with this glossy texture on the vellum. Just remember that you don't want the vellum to extend higher than your bouquet because we don't want to go higher than this peak and prevent the card from fitting into the envelope. I'm going to use one more short piece of tear and tape and put it just right in the middle of this support back here. And peel that off. Then I'm going to take my bouquet with the vellum behind it and insert it into the card. Once you're happy with the placement, you're going to press down the bouquet. Now we just need some finishing touches. I tied a small bow with the twine and I put a little mini glue dot behind it. Just going to place it here on my label. And then I'm going to put a couple of the sequins on. And then we're going to need something on the back so that we can write our message. I cut a simple 3.5 inch square and then cut it down the middle at 1 3/4 inches. Just going to do a little bit of simple stamping on these. I'm stamping the flower images in Rococo Rose. If you don't have that color of ink, you can use the green from the kit, and that also looks great. But if you have the Rococo Rose, then that's one of the coordinating colors. It adds a little extra interest. And I'll come in with some leaf images here. all that's left then is to put some Stampin' Seal on the back and mount these onto the back of the card. Now the pen that I had used to make these markings for you earlier is a friction pen, which is heat sensitive. So I'm going to turn on my heat gun and basically erase those marks. And now we're all set. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity and that you will join me for the next time. Thanks so much. Have a great day.